Well, good morning, everybody. I've really been looking forward to talking to you after this weekend, just watching some of the model evolution, because I think this is going to be a map that's going to change a lot. It's our season to date total snowfall, and right now we look across the country, and our biggest snows throughout this new start to a water year, which begins in October, have been here, like just south of Yellowstone. And as we've watched the models progress, we're going to see some pretty significant changes in through here and possibly a little bit farther to the south. We'll take a look at some of the new model data in just a few seconds here. But right away, I want to give you the latest I've got. This is as of 5:45 this morning here on Monday. We're dealing with some pretty cold air that's throughout parts of the eastern Corn Belt here toward the eastern Great Lakes, Ohio Valley, toward the Appalachian Mountains. So we still have our frost and freeze warnings out here this morning. Got some colder air that's on the backside of this as well. We'll show you that in just a second, but take a look. This is where we've already seen the winter storm watches expand from the northern Cascades, parts of northern Washington, and most of Montana getting to northern Wyoming. And this is going to continue to be something that we're going to watch evolve. This map's going to get really colorful later on this week. So I'd like to show you what's going to happen. And to do this, the story is best told by looking at a map showing 500 millibar vorticity. Now, we've looked at this a lot in the past, and just remember this. What we're watching for are these kind of bands of these deeper shades of color. That represents where there is what we call positive vorticity, or the air is spinning like that. That's the easiest way to think about it. Now, wherever you move a band or kind of a region of high vorticity, positive vorticity, to a place where there's lower or none or negative vorticity, meaning it's spinning the other direction, the air is going to rise. Okay? So as we move this forward, here are the waves we're keeping an eye on. This right in through here is Norma. So it's going to be moving here later on Monday. This is the lead trough that dives down almost into the Baja of California. And here's the secondary trough to its north. Now remember, these two in the European model have always been a bit disconnected, and the GFS kind of moved to that solution. But you're going to see in a few moments that the models ended up kind of blending together to give the best solution for this week. And I'll show you what that's going to look like in just a second. But you need to see the upper level dynamics of this. So by the time we get into Wednesday, this is early Wednesday morning, much deeper trough now shows up in the Pacific Northwest. Norma's moisture and the associated vorticities moving through Illinois, Indiana, and parts of Ohio. And this is going to be the first trough that kicks off the lead wave of this late week winter system, which we've now been talking about for I guess 7 full days. So this is where it is on Wednesday. So you have your lead wave moving through, your wave that's going to kick it out on the backside. And that wave on the backside has its own kicker here. This is really fun. This wasn't well resolved last week. We watched the evolution of this wave showing up in the weekend model trends. So there are 1, 2, 3 troughs all associated with this longer wave. So these are short waves in the longer wave, and they're all going to ride over the top of this southeast ridge. If there is one place that is east of the Rocky Mountains that misses out on anything, it's going to be the southeast. This is going to be warmer, it's going to be drier, and I'm concerned about kind of some fall drought expansion in the southeast. Now, the southeast could have had some of Tammy's moisture right here. This is Tammy, Hurricane Tammy, but Tammy's not going to be able to get through that ridge in order to get into the southeast. So you'll see Tammy's vorticity here spinning through as lead wave goes, secondary wave goes, third wave digs. And we just get through Thursday into Friday. So this is going to keep most of our coldest air and our risk for snow into the north. And then we have a deeper wave coming into the northwest by Friday into Saturday. And this is going to be the one that through the weekend we watch. Look at this sucker. Wow. I mean, that is a long, deep wave that comes in by Sunday. So we're going to watch out for that one and the risk of additional precipitation and in the risk of some pretty cold air following this. What's making this all possible is something we've not seen for weeks, which is a southeast ridge. That's all about that pattern flip you talked about all week last week. So here it is. Ready? You wanted to see the flow. Let's now talk about the outcome. Here's the European model's forecast over the next 7 days for total accumulated snowfall. And the European model did bring this system farther to the south. Now I'm just going to play you out 7 days. So what do we see here? Our heaviest snow band coming out of parts of Idaho into parts of Montana, cutting across North Dakota and hitting parts of southern Manitoba and in Ontario. We are expecting snow, though, here as well, and possibly even a little bit more, clipping parts of Nebraska, Iowa, Minnesota, northern Wisconsin. That's not to leave out the snow that's going to be coming in with all three of these waves into parts of, coming out of Alberta over into Saskatchewan. There will be heavy snows that line up here in the Cascades as well. The Rockies are going to get a healthy dose. It seems that the biggest snows are expected to be in Yellowstone, but just take a look at this. Now, as I showed you last week, do you remember the story last week? The European model was putting all of its snow here. The GFS was putting all of the snow here. And what ended up happening is both models kind of blended together and shoved it in the middle. So again, this is the ECMWF 7-day outlook for total snowfall. This is the European model, or the GFS, forgive me. So European, US. And I like it. Look at that. That's pretty consistent. I'm pretty happy with the model. I mean, well, I'm happy because they're giving me a similar picture. Now, as you know, we talked about last week, these are the operational runs. We have the ensembles to consider as well. And when we look at the ensembles, what I want to do is show you some probability maps. So this is the chance of an inch of snow over the next 7 days. So the GFS, the 0Z run, has got to, let's look for this 50% and better. We just kind of paint a southern line to this. This is an area that has the chance of getting an inch or better of snow. Get north of that area, right in through there. Heavier snowfall amounts, there's the chance for 3 inches of snow. And we again identify 1, 2, 3 corridors here. 6 inches of snow, again, parts of Montana really getting into this part of South Dakota, heaviest. And if we look for that 12 inches, that's what we've got. Now let's make the flip over while it's on 12 inches to show you what the European model is saying. So you can see that they're putting down the same area of having the heaviest snows here right through this corridor. Very similar outlook to what the GFS says on the 12-inch map. Here's the probability of 6 inches over the next 7 days. Again, it's got a pretty similar outlook. So we're really going to be targeting, after it comes through the Cascades, this part of Idaho, Wyoming, Montana, southern Alberta, and Saskatchewan, and then right in through this corridor. Here's our best chance at 3 inches, and then you're going to see here the chance at 1. And overall, while I'd say the European model is a bit more generous with the probabilities into this area than the GFS was, we still have that same kind of southern extent. So I like where the models ended up landing on this for later this week. Okay, bigger picture things. What's making all of this possible is today, the high over low block. Like that is what's setting up the kind of the cascading effect of these troughs coming over the top of that block right in through here. So from the Aleutian Islands and the Bering Sea, just north of Hawaii, that's what's got us there. And that high over low block through the middle of the week turns into an omega block. See it right there? So this is what's going to help reinforce deeper troughs. Now, the big thing that could have made this a massive event is if these two waves would have been much closer together. But instead, we still get the effect of 3 of them. So by the time we get into Friday and Saturday, we're still watching more deep troughs of low pressure roll through this omega pattern. And all that means when we say it's an omega pattern, it's just there's more meridional or north-south flow than west to east. And that flow tends to slow down. It doesn't progress to the east. That's all that these blocking patterns tend to do. But here we are next Sunday into Monday, and just a broad trough just develops all the way across the central and eastern half of North America. What I see behind this, we're going to come back to in a few moments, but we need to pay attention to the southward extent and the extension of the jet overall. But I think there's still a pretty interesting piece here to be discussing going into week 2 and week 3 in this forecast. It's going to be active. So let's go ahead and have a look at some precipitation totals here. We're going to use the European model 10-day outlook, looking at precipitation anomalies. And I see really just 2 big pieces. The southeast ridge really preventing systems to coming through here. Of course, we know that a lot of this is going to be snow. We're going to be watching for a transition in through here, but very heavy rains, some from Norma, then the first wave, the second wave, all of it's kind of coming into this area with the heaviest rainfall amounts possibly being right here on the Red River Valley of the south. But as this moisture does come through, it's going to be hitting some very, very dry acres. And so we need to just kind of see how this is all going to evolve. And I want to show you something. Even though you notice the west going over dry, see this? We'll talk about what that's going to be doing after day 10. Okay, model combination here of the GFS and the ECMWF. Let's get an idea on the timing. So I like what I see here. This is, by the time we get into tonight, the moisture from Norma coming through Oklahoma into Texas. Here is a band of precipitation sitting out ahead of the deeper low. It's in both models, and the snow is already flying in southern parts of Alberta. So this is Monday night. Playing into Tuesday morning, this is when we start to see each of these pieces coming together. So there's a trough here, and there's one waiting up here, and the ridge that's lining itself up along the east coast is beginning to develop. So the flow goes around like this, and this trough is going to ride up that flow, and this one's going to dig and try to come into it. It's all going to come together, all made possible by the high pressure cells, not the low. It's all made possible by this guy right here, and it is in both models pretty clearly. So this is just Tuesday night, tomorrow night. We play into Wednesday morning, Wednesday afternoon and evening. We get our first big round of heavy snow coming out in through here. Okay, it's in both models represented well. More heavy rain for Texas, Oklahoma, getting into Kansas. We then go from Wednesday into Thursday. This is Thursday morning, Thursday afternoon and evening. Now we're into Friday morning, so there's kind of your second ejected wave right in through there. Timing's a little different now. We're 108 hours out in the forecast. Really cold air going to be coming in behind this one. You're going to wait to see these temperatures in a few minutes, but man, and I'm expecting a tight pressure gradient out ahead of this, which means very windy conditions. So this is Friday. We get into Saturday. That southeast ridge holds on to its position. So even into Saturday, look at this, the next round of rain's trying to come in through this area. And you can see that the GFS is more aggressive on the third wave next Saturday, this upcoming Saturday, dropping snow down here than the European model is. But as we go into the weekend, this is Sunday, the European model is just a little later on it. See that? So we're going to be watching this wave number 3 all the way to next Sunday. This is going to be a pretty exciting week of weather forecasting. We get out to next Monday into Tuesday, and again, we continue to see the risk of heavier rain into this area all the way out 7-8 days from now, just continuing to hit parts of the south. Now, again, through most of this, the southeast is missed, parts of the east coast are missed, and we're going to be missing parts of the southwest in California with this pattern, but nearly everywhere else in between is going to get hammered. Let's look at the 0Z model runs total precip through 7 days. As we play this out, that's through Saturday, getting into Sunday. We're going to pause it here. Sunday night, that would match up the model runs. And again, we know snow mostly north, but just take a look at these rainfall amounts here. We have some locations that in the operational runs are up here in this 5 to 7 inch range, while we're going to be drier here and drier here as well. That is the European model. This is the GFS. So, I mean, again, remarkably similar overall in the precipitation. In fact, if you look at the differences, I think the differences overall is that the European model is just a bit wetter down here. And where the GFS is wetter, maybe in parts of the Ohio River Valley, maybe we've got bigger snows here. But overall, remember the stark differences we saw a week ago? They're not really there much anymore. So I just like to see that. I like to see the models coming together. So given that, let's just look at some probability maps. We're going to look only at the European model. This is the chance over the next 7 days of getting an inch of rainfall. Now, I got to be honest, I hear a lot of what folks are talking about, and I'm thinking a lot about my friends in parts of Kansas and Missouri. This is an area that I don't think is well represented on the drought monitor right now, and this is an area that desperately needs rainfall. Parts of Nebraska need it. Iowa needs this so badly, and of course, we know about the long-standing drought in parts of Texas. So how much? Well, this is the chance of 2 inches, and this is the chance of 4. And I bet I can already tell you what the comments are going to be. I got some folks in here are going to say, prove it, because they have been missed. Well, we got some areas right here in parts of Kansas have now seen over 1 3/4 inches in over 400 days. So to see a potential event come in through this part of the country and deliver this much rainfall is going to be incredible to watch. It is a significant shift over the pattern we've been observing. On the drier side of this is who's not going to be seeing much rainfall. We've identified these regions, and we're just kind of now getting a chance to see the probabilities. And if you're curious on the really dry side of it, this is the chance of seeing less than 1/10 of an inch. So it is parts of the southeast, and it is the southwest. That's overall our driest spots outside of this little strip here on the northern side of the Canadian prairie. All right, bigger picture going into week 1, see the 3 maps across the top versus week 2. We are watching in week 2 the evolution of a much more extended and more southerly Pacific jet. I like what the CPC came up with here. It's mimicked in the European model, and the GFS finally made a break away from calling for very dry conditions in the west. So this is starting to evolve into week 2 as being an important pattern shift overall. Now, the context of all of this is this map. This is what the first 3 weeks of October look like in terms of precipitation ranks. So we've been watching this extended time period of hot and dry conditions in the Southwest. We know how dry it has been into these states we just mentioned in the Ohio River Valley, the lower Mississippi River Valley, and parts of the mid-Atlantic. We did watch drought expand in last week's update right down here in parts of the Southeast, but we're still sitting at about 60% coverage in the lower 48. Keeping track on some of the big things like the Mississippi River. This is our latest 100 centimeter or 40-inch soil moisture map. Again, much of the Mississippi Basin, including the Ohio and parts of the Missouri, continue to be quite low. But take a look. The river did bounce up a bit this weekend. As of early this morning, it is now at 9.99 feet below low stage after touching 12 feet below low stage last week. I expect this to start the turn for the Mississippi River going forward. The other thing that we need to watch is the temperature pattern flip. So far, the first 3 weeks of October have looked like pretty chilly conditions in the southeast, very, very warm in the southwest, all the way up the west coast of the United States. We know that that's about to change in a big way. There's a lot of colder air coming in, especially out of the Canadian prairie, butting up against the Rocky Mountains. That's what's helping to make the snow possible in Montana. There's some big upslope flow chances here. Well, let's go have a look at it. Early this morning, we had temperatures touching freezing in parts of Nebraska. We had the frost and freeze advisories that were out here in parts of the eastern Corn Belt, but this is the warm-up that's going to be happening ahead of this big system. Pretty impressive temperature contrast this week is expected. So where are we going to get frost? Well, this is now, and again tomorrow morning, and then this is where all the colder air is coming in behind this. Let's go have a look at those high temperatures, because after having a frost this morning in Nebraska, we're going to see about up to a 40-degree change in temperature, very, very warm, 90s in Kansas. This is Monday's highs. This is into Tuesday. Now watch right here. Going from Tuesday into Wednesday, highs in the 20s on Wednesday. There it is Thursday. Friday, the front advances. Heat goes east. Cooling in the west, deep cold in the northern plains. And that's Sunday. There's a week's worth of temperatures for you. How long does that colder air last? Okay. Well, this is the next 5 days. We watch it advance through the weekend, and that's day 5 through 10, which gets us, most of the way through early next week. We then watch that colder air continue to set up across the country here as we start a new month of November. And the only thing that's happening with the west becoming more mild is that we're just going to be bringing in more zonal flow and therefore better moisture, but just mild Pacific air is expected in the west going forward. We're going to see some pretty chilly air to start this month of November. Really well forecast there overall. So here you go. This is the thing we paid so much attention to last week. Let's talk about it now. The P&A. It's negative now. It's expected to be negative all week into early next week, and then it just comes back here and sits around neutral. So when I see a neutral P&A, what that's telling me is no high amplitude flow coming into the western part of the United States. We've been under high amplitude flow for most of October. There was a deep trough here, big ridge that built there, and then a deep trough over the east. That was our amplified meridional flow that kept bringing ridges into the west and deep cold air into the southeast. That's gone. You've now seen that evolve. I showed you it a few moments ago. What that did was that kept the jet stream more northerly in its trajectory, and it kind of came in and then dove like this. So are we done with that? I think we are. And the big reason for that, we watched for several weeks subsidence building here. We watched rising motion here. Okay, let's put an X where there's subsidence, a dot where there's rising motion, and this is where all the action's going to be now. You see, if you look out there in the forecast, we see that for the next 15 days, the MJO is stuck. There's subsidence in phase 4-5, and we're watching more and more evidence, see this right in through here, of rising motion into phase 1. And if that happens, that just tends to get the jet stream cranking troughs, weaker ridges, cranking troughs coming out of the Pacific Ocean. It means we're going to see more frequent East Coast ridges. That would be the pattern this would likely settle into. Now, you could make an argument we're getting this right now, and of course we are. But the thing is that we expect maybe for this to come back again in late October, the beginning of November. And I'm seeing that also in the evidence that the jet stream is trying to make and stay more shifted toward the equator and extended. Now, what does all this mean? Why did I go through those 4 slides right there? I went through them to show you this. 10 days from now, when we start this new month, well, we'll be a couple of days into it, the jet stream, which spent most of October way up here, is now here. And what you're going to watch is the Pacific Jet from October 2nd, 3rd, and 4th make its extension all the way into the west coast. So whenever that happens, that's perpendicular to our mountains, they tend to do really well with precipitation. And it's not as though the flow is something to sneeze at across the rest of the country. Now, we do have some colder air in the east to start the month of November. But do we see a rebounding of a ridge possibly in the southeast? There is the chance that that could happen. But overall, I look out here through the first week of November and I'm like, yeah, bring it. This is good flow across our northern hemisphere. And that's just giving me better kind of hope that the European model for the month of November has got this right. Because this is not typical of El Nino. Well, maybe in California, but not in the Northwest. And this, right in through here, getting this moisture this far into the Ohio and Tennessee and Mississippi Valley, and not even blocking off the southeast for moisture, that's our newest outlook for the month of November from the European model. And it's been pretty consistent with this. If you watched me last week, you know that it was doing this for quite some time. So I look at all of that and say, well, is El Nino contributing anything to this? Or is it driven more by what's going on in the Indian Ocean? Or the fact we've watched the Pacific Decadal Oscillation begin to slowly change? You know, what's spurring a lot of this on? Well, I just want to tell you, I think that all the subseasonal factors are still kind of winning the day. I don't think that the El Nino has got hold of it could get a hold of it later in December or January or February as it reaches a peak. But if you said, well, is this all driven by El Nino? I'd say, well, no, because El Ninos, where the blues are, typically dry here, really wet here, and really wet here. Now, we can see that we've got wet weather coming through here, but that doesn't match up. So I'm just telling you that El Nino is the base state of this, but there's too many overriding factors that are controlling it. Okay, so where we're going to finish up, I want to go back to what the CPC said for its 1 month outlook. I would make an adjustment to the west. I would say that this is not going to be as as warm as advertised here, maybe in the southwest, but not here. And I would put more normal to wetter than normal conditions in the west going forward. I would also have this area, I think, seeing more better chances of precipitation as well. That's just the adjustments I would make over the weekend. All right, from here, I want to give you an update on South America. Brazil's planting pace continued to stay above the 5-year average. They're now about 10% above where the 5-year average is. They're about 7% off of last year. Now, I say Brazil, but this is for Mato Grosso, and this is soybean planting only. As we look at the forecast, the newest European run continues to cause major flooding problems in southern Brazil. By the time we get into this late weekend time frame, the models are once again tossing out here, 100 to 150 millimeters of rainfall. That's 4+ inches of rain across an area that I showed you last week has been just dominated by flooding. The models over-predicted the rainfall that was coming into Argentina. There is rain, but it is not as widespread and heavy as anticipated. Most of the amounts are, somewhere here in this 30 millimeter range or lower, which is about an inch or less. They needed way more than that. Our holdout is going to be this section of northeastern Brazil, including parts of Bahia, but we are expecting more normal rains to move their way back into parts of central Brazil, which means planting progress will probably continue to be relatively aggressive. I'm going to give you one last map to look at here, and I just want to make a point about it. The IRI multi-model forecast system here, it's a statistical system that rides over the top of the NMME. They continue to show this. That is what I'll be watching for probably 6 weeks or longer. The dryness here that they've got now, they're looking way longer than I just mentioned. But it is a suggestion that we're going to continue to see stagnant tropical flow, meaning subsidence there and rising motion here. So what does that mean for the U.S., which is downstream of all of this? And what does it mean for South America going forward into this winter? We're just going to have that discussion. And we're going to spend some more time this week talking about some international weather. So thanks for sticking around with me this morning. I look forward to giving you updates each day this week. We'll talk again tomorrow. Thanks.